Gotta give it another couple minutes so everybody can get their words in.
I said cumbersome, but daunting.
So we have some words floating to the top here. We have compliance, accountability, expensive. We're gonna talk about that. Necessary.
You have to pay for an audit.
Yes. Governance. We're gonna talk about that. Daunting.
CPAs,
Okay.
like stuff like that.
We're gonna work through that. Stress. That was the first word that popped up. We're gonna work through that one. Trust, honesty, worry. Okay. Accurate. Somebody said love it. You want to come to the front of the stage? Exposure. Okay. Comply. College accounting. I mean, yeah. Obligated. Required. All right. Checks and balances. I think you saw the presentation. That's good. Wrongdoing. Okay. We're going to address some of that. Boredom. I hope you're not going to be bored here today. Headache. All right. We have some good words here. So we're going to address the words that floated to the top. I'm happy about that. We're going to address expensive. We're going to address necessary, accountability. We're going to try to address daunting as well. Time consuming, and we're going to try to work through those. So we'll switch back to the presentation. Thank you for participating. All right, so audit, checks, and balances, that was one of the words that came up, so you get up and read. So part of what we're going to talk about, so we're going to go over corporate governance. What is it and the role that we all play here? Audit, what is it and why it's important? We're going to go over some common audit myths, some common audit findings, how you can prepare for an audit and or remediate findings you already have from an audit. We're going to talk about managing audit costs like we talked about, and then ongoing governance. You guys are way quiet, so if you have questions, you just go ahead and raise your hand or you can call them out to me. So corporate governance, this is really important. And corporate governance is how we protect our customers, right? It's something that helps us to be accountable to our customers and transparent. There was a study that was done that said that corporate governance and integrity, transparency, responsibility, from a consumer perspective, they identify those things as synonymous with integrity. So it's going to be important that we have all of these four pillars. So corporate governance, the four pillars are accountability, transparency, responsibility, and fairness. And I'm going to go through and define those. But the first thing I talked about is that customers, our consumers, associate these things with integrity and whether or not they can trust a company. So first I want you to think about, who are your customers? Anybody want to shout out some answers? Who are your customers? Who do you serve?
Members.
Members, yes. Who else? Your partners, your community. So I looked you guys up because I was like, let me understand my audience and be prepared. So I saw that one of the things that stood out to me is that you guys have 11,000 members. And the phrasing said that you're the largest network of Black professionals. So like you said, your members, those are your customers, right? So I was like, okay, so their customers are business professionals, that's great. Then I looked at your programs. And part of your program said that you are positioned to help the Black community reach the highest levels of academia, increase lifetime median income potential, and reduce unemployment rates among the Black community. I was like, okay. All right, so your customers are Black professionals and Black academia. Then I looked at a program called RISE, and it talked about providing the business tools to advocate for social justice in a business environment. So then I was like, wait a minute, their customers are not just business professionals, they're not just academia, but they are the Black community. They're the entire community, right? Because as Martin Luther King says, justice anywhere, social injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, right? So you guys are serving customers on a larger scale. So as we go through this presentation, I really want you to think about those customers, right? Because your customers really need you to have good corporate governance and to be transparent. Make sense?
Yes.
With me?
Yes.
Okay, so corporate governance is a set of rules, practices, and processes used to direct and control an organization. So every organization, no matter how big it is or how small it is, requires some level of corporate governance. Corporate governance can also be defined as the power structure, accountability structure, and the decision-making process. So we're going to talk about some of those things where you have to be accountable and transparent in all of those processes. So accountability, that's the first one. It is defined as the action of being held responsible for results obtained after providing a given activity. Transparency is the process of being open, honest, straightforward about the company's operations. Then we get to responsibility. And I was trying to figure out, like, what's the difference between responsibility and accountability? Does anybody know that? So responsibility is task-oriented, whereas accountability is about ownership. So it's not just about being responsible for the tasks you do, but it's also about owning the results. And I promise all this is going to start making sense when we start talking about audit. And then fairness is about equality. It's about being open, it's about being honest, and providing a transparent product. So corporate governance, keep this in mind, and then keep your customers in mind. And then I'm going to talk to you about white meat audit. Okay, so I get it. You want me to do what and why? So I know you have enough to do, and you don't have time for an audit. But an audit is important. So as we talked about in the word cloud, a lot of you think audit is what you see there on the left. It's somebody telling you what to do. It's somebody telling you what you've done wrong. It's somebody telling you everything negative, right? But actually, it's a road to opportunity. Because an audit doesn't just tell you what's wrong. It just tells you what it is, right? It's like going to get a physical. You go to your doctor, you get the physical, it has all these numbers associated with it. It tells you some numbers are good, some numbers are not so good. But guess what? The numbers are still not so good, even if you don't get it done. It's there. You just don't know it. So an audit is kind of like that. It's going to tell you, hey, listen, you're doing great. You're drinking your water. You're minding your business. Continue to do that, right? But it's also going to tell you, maybe you should not eat all of those sweets. Maybe you need to run a little bit. Maybe you need to get a little bit more sleep. All of those things, both of those things are things that you need to know. So we want to think about an audit as a road to opportunity. It identifies what you can improve, but it also gives you a high five. You're like, listen, this is what you're doing great. And so one of my favorite quotes here is, success is where preparation meets opportunity, right? So I don't believe in luck, but part of your success has to meet the preparation, and part of the preparation is going to be your audit. Question? All right, so now I want to get into some audit myths. I hear this one a lot. Auditing is only for big businesses. We're small. We don't need to have an audit. I would argue that smaller organizations oftentimes need an audit more, because you have difficulties in areas like segregation of duties, because there's so few people, right? You have people who have a lot of responsibility and a lot of access to things because you have such few people. So big businesses do need audits, but so do small businesses, maybe even more. Like I said, another myth is that auditing is only for finding errors and fraud. Now, auditing can uncover errors and fraud, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is really to provide assurance. And it's to provide comfort around the financial statements. So another myth is auditing is too expensive. And I know you guys are like, that's not actually a myth. That one is really true. Okay. Auditing is expensive sometimes, but I'm going to give you some tools to help you to reduce some of the costs around auditing. But auditing doesn't have to be expensive. Only accountants can perform audits. That's not true. I'm not an accountant, I'm an auditor. So I'm not actually a CPA, but I still perform audits for a large company. And then all nonprofits require a full audit. That's also not true. So I'm going to talk to you about auditing, and I'm going to tell you, it's like maybe you don't actually have to have an audit, but I'm going to help you kind of understand what you can do instead. Okay, so the why. An audit, by definition, is an official examination and verification of accounts, records, and especially of financial accounts. So when you hear audit, that's likely what you're thinking about. You're thinking about somebody's looking at the financial statements, they're looking at the records, and they're identifying whether or not those financial statements and records are accurate. And that is true. But an audit can also be the inspection or examination of a process to evaluate and improve its appropriateness, effectiveness, efficiency, and controls. So it's not always about just the number. A lot of times, and most of the time, it's about the process that leads to that number. Most of the time, that's the most important thing. So, you know, when you go to the gym, they're gonna look at you and be like, you have your trainer and they're saying, let me show you how to do that correctly, right? Because the process is what gets you the results, not necessarily just the results. And the what? What does it result in? Enhancing controls, managing risk, driving operational efficiency, advancing organizational resilience, and inspiring trust. We talked about that trust before. So enhancing controls. An audit is going to tell you where you have control deficiencies. It's going to tell you where you have controls operating effectively too. So we'll help you to enhance those controls. It'll help you manage your risk because it's going to tell you where your risks are. And a lot of times we have that as a blind spot, right? We have a blind spot as to where our risks are, where our opportunities are, where our vulnerabilities are, and an audit will help you to uncover those things and help you identify the practical steps to mitigate those risks. And then driving operational efficiency. Everybody needs efficiency, right? Do you guys have, I don't know about you, but I don't have enough people on my team. Do you guys have a surplus of people? Surplus of resources? No? Okay. So we need more efficiency. So it'll help you to drive operational efficiency by showing you where you can streamline some of your processes and where you can kind of cut some of it back. And then advancing organizational resilience. This is super important to the consumers and the customers that you serve, right? They want you to continue to be around. If you think about yourself as a consumer, any product that you purchase, any organization that you use, you would feel less secure if you thought that they were kind of fly by night, right? They're here today, gone tomorrow. You want an organization to serve you that's going to be there. If you buy a product, you want to make sure that you can bring it back if it doesn't work. If you're unhappy with service, you want somebody to complain to. Part of internal controls and audits help you to create that organizational resilience because it helps you to shore up the company and make the company stronger. And then inspiring trust. That's just what it is. You want your customers to trust you. And your customers, like we talked about, are not just external to you. Your customers are internal. You have internal customers. You want them to trust your product. You want them to trust what you say. You want them to trust what you're doing with their dues. You want them to trust their grantors. You want them to trust what you're going to do with that money. And part of that is having somebody external from your body looking at your financials and looking at your process and saying, you know, we're going to give a solid opinion here. We think that this company is operating correctly. Okay, so here are some common audit findings. So you guys don't have to be afraid of the audit. I'm going to tell you probably the issues that you're having right now. Inadequate documentation. We see this all the time. An example of that is not having your appropriate bank signers documented. If you have an organization where you have some turnover, you have a board that turns over, you have leadership that turns over at a certain iteration, if you do not redocument that, if you do not say, you know, that board, that treasurer, that person is no longer here, here's the new person that sits in that role. If you don't have that documentation, that is a risk because that person that was there before can now write checks, can open a bank account, can empty a bank account, right? SOPs or standard operating procedures. Having documented policies and procedures about how things should be done. Having guidelines that people can follow. If we don't have guidelines, how can you tell somebody they're not doing something wrong? Right? Or that they're not doing something right, or that they are doing something wrong. You need something to evaluate against. You need to provide people with guidance. Again, policies and procedures. What should be done? What is within the boundaries of the rules, and what is outside of the boundaries of the rules? Lack of internal controls. Segregation of duties. And I know everybody's going to want to throw something at me. I know it's hard to segregate when you have a small organization, but we're going to talk about some of the things you can do there. But segregation of duties is very important. And like I said, we'll get into those details. Reviews and approvals. Do you have those processes in place? Who can review stuff? Who has the authority to do it? Who has the authority to approve it? Are they actually following up and doing those things? Reconciliations, like bank reconciliations, where's the money going? Do you know? When's the last time you looked at your financials? When's the last time you looked at your bank account? Do you understand all of the transactions? Do you agree with all of the transactions? Inconsistencies of financial statements, making sure you're following the same accounting processes and practices. Again, that goes to the policies and procedures. If you have a leadership team and that leadership team turns over, are you being consistent, or does a new team get to decide what happens? And how do you account for any variances between the two? Timeliness of entries. Is it something that we're like, I'll do it when I get to it, or I'll do it when somebody asks me to do it? That's what it is. Or I'll do it when I have to turn in the documentation, right? I get it. But if you don't do things timely, it's difficult to catch mistakes or errors, and it's difficult to correct mistakes and errors. And then non-compliance with laws, regulations, and internal policies. So you guys are, you are a nonprofit that has a governing body, but then you also, if I understand it properly, are registered in your individual states, correct? Okay. So it's important that you understand that even though you have a national chapter, if you are registered in your individual state, you have to follow the laws of your individual state. So it's important to understand that, right? It's important to understand what those laws are. What are the requirements? Do they require you to do an audit? How frequently do they require you to do an audit? Because you're held to those standards. And then again, documented policies and evidence of adherence. So somebody comes and asks you, did you approve that? How? Oh, I just told them they could do it. So we have a saying, if it's not documented, it didn't happen, right? If you didn't sign something, if you didn't say, I authorize this, there is no approval, there's no evidence, there's nothing for an auditor to test. It didn't actually occur. Still no questions? But effective audit management leads to complete documentation that you're reviewing on a regular basis, strong internal controls, accurate and consistent financial statements, and full compliance with laws, regulations, and internal policies. This is the side of the chart that we want to get to. You see the lady smiling. She wasn't happy on the last one, but she's smiling now because she has all her documentation, she has her controls in place. Okay, so now you know that you have to do an audit, but the question is, how? What do I need to do to prepare? What is the next step? And when do I need to do it? Because I'm busy. So you need to do it every day. It's the small practices that lead to success, not the large things that you do when everybody's scrambling. You know you have an auditor coming in next week. You have all hands on deck. We're up until 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're all trying to prepare and create documentation for this audit. That's what we don't want to do. So I have some steps here, right? Clear guidelines, well-written SOPs, and those SOPs need to say who does it, what are they doing, when are they doing it, what is the frequency, where are they doing it, and how? Is there a specific system? Is there certain tools that you need to use? And you need to be consistent in practice and in reviews. Monitoring and enforcement, I'll talk about this one because this is huge. So you have SOPs, you're saying what needs to be done, but who's responsible for monitoring to make sure that it actually happens? You have to have that piece in place, right? Because we all know we get busy. People don't often, most of the time, people don't have bad intentions, they just don't have time. They have other things to do. They have day jobs, they're volunteers, they have other things that they need to be doing, but somebody needs to make sure that the processes and the practices and policies are being followed on a consistent basis. Risk mitigation. You guys likely know what your risks are, but a lot of the times risks are around financial theft, financial abuse. What are the processes you have in place to identify that and to prevent it, right? Because people are paying dues, they are expecting something to be done with those dues, and we need to make sure that we're governing those monies. And then succession planning. This is such a big item for boards and leadership teams that turn over. How are you planning for when you're no longer there? Are you just like, hey, you know, like I'm not gonna be here, so it's not my problem anymore? Or are you putting processes in place to succession plan? Are you preparing that next person? Are they walking into a mess? Are you conducting yourself in a way that they walk into an organized and well-oiled machine so that they can improve the process, right? Hopefully we all work to leave a legacy. I'm gonna do the best I can with the skills and the talent I have, and then the next person can take that mantle and move it further, not have to redo things or take a step back because I haven't done something I need to do. And then the last one is maintain evidence. Again, if there's no evidence, it did not occur. So have all these guidelines, be consistent, mitigate your risk, monitor and enforce, succession plan, improve your processes, and document your risks.
Tamika Lindsay with the Charlotte chapter. And when you do an audit, yesterday we heard that the IRS timeframe for retention is 7 years. Is that the same for audits?
So it depends on, so that is for usually for personal, right? An IRS can go back to you.
Share it with everybody.
I shared it with the president even.
But each type of document has its own retention period. So the IRS has guidelines about how long we need to keep everything, but it's not just the IRS. It's also, if you're requesting funds from governing bodies, if you're requesting funds from the state, if you're requesting funds from other nonprofits, they may have guidelines about how long you need to keep documentation. But generally, the IRS can go back 10 years.
As far as nonprofits, what kind of accounting systems would you suggest that people use, or auditing systems in general?
Auditing system or accounting system?
Actually, the question is more for auditing systems
So auditing systems,
for nonprofits.
for nonprofits. So listen, here's my suggestion, and I own a nonprofit, so I'm talking to you guys not about what I heard, but about what I know. So I have a very small nonprofit. When I say very small, I mean like 2 people. So it is very difficult to
She's not on the microphone, is she?
auditing.
Can you get closer to the microphone?
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Auditing programs can be very expensive, and you don't necessarily need an auditing program. What you need is a checklist, which I actually provide at the end of this presentation, right? You just need to know, here are the areas that I need to review, and here's how I review them. But you don't necessarily need a robust auditing program. Now, if you hire an auditor to come in, they will come in maybe with a program, but oftentimes they'll come in, the auditing program is generally around how they communicate with each other, not necessarily how they do the audit. So for example, at Comcast we used to use the auditing program called Teammates. Teammates wasn't about how we audit other people. We created the audit program that goes into it. It was really about how we communicate with our supervisors, how we write a report, and how we publish those results to whomever the client was. But we created the audit program, and that can be done in Word, it can be done in Excel. You don't need a fancy program. You just need the actual, the actual questions and the things that you need to review. That's a good question, though. All right, I'm starting to wake up a little bit. Yes.
Hi, my name is Timo Thompson, representing the Houston chapter. And my question is, what the cadence should be for performing mock audits? And is it an audit maturity scale that you utilize to measure your organization's proficiency?
Okay, so the first question was how frequently you should conduct mock audits?
Yes.
Okay. So I recommend conducting an internal audit every year. Now, it doesn't have to be a full-blown internal audit, right? Like I said, I'm gonna give you a checklist at the end. But it's just a checkup of how are we doing? How are we doing against last year? How are we doing against, against what we want to do next year or whatever our plan is? But I recommend doing it once a year. And what was the second half of that question?
Is there a maturity scale that you utilize to measure your organization?
So, yeah, so I don't think it's a standard maturity scale, but I think you develop your own maturity scale, right? Because as you are new in this space, first of all, if you have an external auditor come in, they're going to give you a laundry list of everything that you can do, right? They're going to say, if you can, I want 5 different people to review this. And that might be impractical. Maybe it's your goal. If that's your goal, you identify when that's your goal, and that's how you measure where you are. But usually how I measure the audit maturity of a business is internally even what we do is we look at the last audit and we look at how far they've come from a, controls that are not operating effectively. How many management action plans do they have? How frequently are they reviewing their own controls and their own financials? And that's how we determine how mature they are from an audit perspective.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right, separation of duties. This is the one I know you guys are gonna throw something at me, but just give me a minute, okay? So ideally, no one person should initiate, approve, record, and reconcile a transaction, right? That means that they have full control of that transaction. If they can do each of these steps, it'd be very difficult for you to identify if there's abuse in your organization. So even though it may be difficult, you may not have 4 people who can do each of those, you may be able to separate them. So one person initiates it, somebody else reviews it, and then a third person reconciles. But the initiation and the approval should definitely not be the same person, right? And that makes sense, right? So you wouldn't want, when you go to, think about your own business or your own personal business when you go to the bank. The teller may initiate something, right? But you have to authorize it. You have to put your ATM card in there and put in the PIN and say, I'm authorizing you to move this much money. And they're gonna ask you something, they're gonna get you to sign something because they're trying to cover themselves. So they initiate it, but you approve it. But what if they didn't need something like that? What if they could just look up your account and start moving money around? You would be like, wait a minute, wow. That's not appropriate. They could take my money. Yeah, that's the point. That's why you don't want to have those two things together. And ideally, you would have somebody else to record and reconcile those. And a lot of times when you initiate something, it records it at the same time. So then there would just need to be somebody else to reconcile. And the reconciliation is just kind of going back, just like you balance your checkbook, going back and saying, this is what I thought I had here, this is what I thought happened, this is actually what happened. There should be 2 sets of eyes on each transaction to assure transparency and accountability. Remember when we started, we talked about corporate governance, and 2 of the big pieces were transparency and accountability. You always want to make sure that however you're conducting business, if somebody walked up to you and asked you a question, you would feel completely comfortable opening up your books and saying, this is exactly what's happening, I know what's happening, and I'm comfortable that everything that's happening is appropriate. I think one of the things that Comcast tells us all the time is, don't send an email that you don't want on the news, you don't want on the front of the New York Times. Don't do a transaction that you don't want everybody to look at, including your members. Are they gonna feel comfortable with what you're doing with those funds? And these 2 things reduces risk and both intentional and unintentional errors. Because let's be real, some people are doing things intentionally. Some people just don't know, but some people do know. And if they do know what they're doing, and they do know that you're not gonna look at it, they do know that it's easy to get away with. And this protects the business and those it serves. Again, going back to those customers. Your customers are relying on you to have control of the business, control of the finances, control of the internal controls. Okay, so who is supposed to do the work and where do I get the resources? I know you guys are thinking this. All right, so managing audit costs. So I'm going to tell you how to make an audit less expensive, and then I'm going to tell you other things you can do instead of getting an audit, right? So if you implement strong internal controls, that's going to make your audit less expensive because it's going to take less time. If I as an auditor come in and I'm looking at your books and I'm looking at your processes and you don't have anything documented, something that was supposed to be a 12-week audit is now going to be longer because I have to figure out what's happening. There's nothing here for me to audit against. I have to document everything. So that's going to take you longer. Anything that takes longer costs more money. Develop detailed documentation and review it annually. The review it annually is so important. And the reason it's important is because you change things. Things change. Business is dynamic. Sometimes you do it this way and you may have an improvement. You need to review your policies and procedures to ensure that you have it whatever you have documented, you do it. Good. Yes. Right? Okay. And then review financials monthly to catch and correct any errors detected. If you review your financials, you identify errors, and you correct them, and you can show that to an auditor, that is an example of a control. And then when you talk to the auditor about what the business is doing, what management is doing, they have a level of trust that you are performing those controls. And that if something was wrong, you would have caught it. If you don't have that in place, they have to dive deep into each transaction. And again, what costs more time costs more money. And then you can consider other types of engagements. So I've been talking about audits, but that's not the only engagement that's available to you. A review is available and is highly recommended in most cases. So a review is a lower level of assurance, and it's about the reliability of the financials. It provides limited assurance. And I'll dig into that a little bit deeper on the next slide. A compilation is an external preparation of the financial statements to determine if they're free from material error, but there is no assurance. So whereas an audit is going to look at your finances, your internal controls, and they're going to say, they're going to provide an opinion, and they'll provide full assurance. A review is going to look at just your financials, and they'll provide limited assurance. A compilation is not looking at anything. They're going to take all of the data, and they are going to do your financials, and then give it to you to compare against. But they will provide no assurance. And then agreed upon procedures is when an auditor performs limited procedures on a limited subject matter. So if you have something you're concerned about, if you have an area that you're concerned about, you can have an auditor come in and just look at that to provide you with some level of assurance. And so another way to manage costs is to be creative. Ask for volunteers or pro bono services. A lot of people have continuing education needs, they have requirements, they are willing to give to the community. I'm an attorney, I do pro bono hours all the time. So that will help you to have somebody who reviews your financials, but it may not cost you as much money as you expect it to if you are creative. And then this is an MBA association, right? So you probably have people here who are auditors who have CPAs. Ask them, is there somebody who's willing to donate their services or to conduct an audit for a reduced rate? And then negotiate rates. I am a proponent of negotiation. I highly recommend negotiating everything. I put the microphone close to my mouth for this. So in everything, the first price is an offer. Negotiate in everything. All the time. Any questions on this? Okay, so an audit versus a financial review. So an audit is full assurance and financial review is limited assurance. So the expected costs. An audit can cost an organization between $10,000 to $20,000 depending on the size. A financial review is generally half that cost. For organization size, large and complex organizations are required to have an audit. Financial review, small organizations with less than $50,000 in revenue typically can get by with a financial review. So when do you need one? An audit when the state law requires it, or it's a condition of grants or federal funding. But you can get a financial review with many banks, many grantors. If you explain to them what you're doing, a lot of times they'll say, well, a financial review is good enough because I just want to make sure that your financials are accurate, right? Because they're making decisions based on your financials. So if they have assurance that that is accurate, they'll be comfortable with that. And I recommend you do it at least biannually. So not twice a year, but every other year. And then the assurance level for an audit is the highest level of assurance and it's an expert opinion. So when you get an audit report, they're going to opine about your financial statements and your controls. But for a financial review, it's limited assurance. So they're going to tell you, they're going to provide some assurance, but they're not going to opine about your financials or your controls. And the reason for that is in a financial review, they do not review your internal controls. They do not do testings. They do not do a management letter. But they will point out red flags that they stumble upon. Go ahead.
Loving this. I love everything about it. Love it. Question, this audit versus financial review chart, we've been kind of having conversations about this for quite a while. I see a line that says organization size under financial review, small organizations with less than 500,000 in revenue. Is that now the established expectation from a Black MBA perspective, or this is just information?
This
for
is
us?
just information.
Come on, now, just say it's for everybody.
Sorry, I cannot set policy for your organization. But I have provided this to your leaders, and so they can make their own decision.
Come on.
But, so for internal controls, your audit will define or will provide an opinion on your internal controls. They'll do testing, walkthroughs, and physical inspections. But that's a good question. So your leadership team asked me to talk about this, so it's something that they're probably reviewing. Any other questions? Do we understand when we can get a financial review? Do you have any questions about what that is or how it's done or anything like that? So ongoing governance. Yes, there's more. So we've talked to you about what corporate governance is, what an audit is, when you should do it, the benefits of it, and how to manage the costs. Now we're just going to talk about good business practices. So here are some common mistakes leaders in small businesses make. They treat the business like it's their own, right? Like it's their own personal checkbook. It is not. You may not balance your checkbook, you still have to balance the checkbook of the business. You still have to review the financials on a monthly basis, even if that's not what you do for your own personal finances. Now reviewing statements and financials regularly. This is something that should be done on a monthly basis. You need to be reviewing the financial statements and the bank statements, your financials regularly. This is very important. Again, the quicker you find errors, the quicker you can pivot, the quicker you can correct things. Trusting but failing to verify. We all want to be trusted, and nobody wants to feel like they're not trusting. Like, I don't want to make him feel like I don't trust him. Trust but verify. It's not that you don't trust them, I just want to verify. That's your job, that's your responsibility. You are accountable for this, for the financials. Here's number 4, we talked about this at the beginning. I'm gonna put the microphone close to my mouth again. Pretending that if you ignore it, it will go away.
Let's see.
It will not.
It won't?
It will not. Just because somebody doesn't tell you it occurs, it's still there. Just like when you go to the doctor, if they don't tell you you have high blood pressure, it doesn't mean you don't. If you don't go, you still have it, you just don't know. Okay? You want to know what's happening. Don't think that ignoring it makes it go away. Ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance will come back to get you later. Failing to hold peers, team members, and themselves accountable. Remember we talked about that responsibility is about task, accountability is about the outcome, ownership of the outcome. So it's not just about making sure that the task is done right or wrong, it's about owning whatever happens after that. And then failing to understand and follow state regulations. Again, this is so important. You guys are incorporated in many different states. Your national chapter, just because whatever their state regulations are, doesn't mean that that's the state regulations for each of the individual chapters. You have to know and understand what you're required to do from a regulatory perspective. And then one of my favorite quotes is, it's said that a wise person learns from his mistakes, a wiser one learns from others' mistakes, but the wisest of all learns from others' successes. Right? So figure out what other people are doing right. You're not in this alone. Look at all these chapters that are represented here. Somebody has a best practice. Learn from each other, right? Learn what works. Learn what doesn't work. Learn what went well. Learn what didn't go well. If somebody had an audit and it was great and it wasn't very expensive, share that information. If somebody knows a quick way to reconcile, do reviews. If somebody has it locked down in lock and step, learn from each other. Don't think that you can't share information, right? We're stronger together. We're weaker separate. But learn from other people's successes. So I provided some resources here for you. So here's an audit. There's going to be a link, and you guys will get this hopefully electronically. If not, we can figure out how to get it to you. But it's Audit Preparation Guide for Nonprofits. This is going to be helpful. It's going to walk you step by step through each of the areas that you need to review in order to prepare for an audit. A guide to conducting an internal financial review. So I told you you should do a financial review every other year, but this is gonna be a guide to show you how to do it internally so that you can do it each year, or whatever frequency you think is appropriate, that is not more than once a year, not less than once a year. And then audit requirements for nonprofits by state. So I told you it's important to know what the regulations are in your particular state, and this link will provide you with those requirements. Okay, questions? Let's talk.
Bernard Walker, Seattle chapter. Are there additional suggestions that you would make, assuming that we do all of this, and then one of our officers clicks on a phishing link? How do we protect ourselves?
Oh, we're gonna talk cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Lucky for you, I can talk cybersecurity too.
Yes.
So you're saying that you've done everything to protect yourself, and now somebody's clicked on a link, and now you're exposed from a cyber perspective. So first thing I would say, this is proactive. This is not where you are right now, that's already happened, but proactively, we all need to be educated about phishing. So let me just give you a quick education really quick right now. If you don't recognize who's sending you the email, do not click on the email. Do not click the link. Hover over the link and see who is actually sending it, right? That will have the actual address. So just like if you look at this slide here, there is a lot of information behind each of these links, right? But I did a quick link that will tell you what I wanted you to know. When you have a phishing email, that's exactly what they're doing. There's a quick link that tells you what they want you to see, and then behind it is the actual information. If you hover over that, it will show the actual information. And you can identify, this actually isn't from Bank of America. This is from, I got you. So that's the first thing, right? If you don't recognize it, don't click, take an additional step, take a pause, and figure out who it's coming from. If you are in the position, though, that somebody's already clicked the link and your information is already compromised, the first thing I would say is sequester that person and their email, right? Lock them out of everything. Lock them out of all tools, lock them out of all systems. Because the purpose of phishing is to get your credentials so that they can do something else. This sounds harsh, but they really don't care about that person, right? They don't want their information. They want something else. They want their bank account, they want the organization's information, and that's what they're going for. So you have to sequester that person. And then I suggest you can run some like virus tools. There's a lot of things on the market that can help you to extract the information from that computer. But for the time being, unlock that computer, undock it, take it off of your network, and don't allow that person to use it anymore until you've had a professional review it. Because they're trying to get something else, right? They're trying to get something more valuable than just to say, hey, I got this person to click this link. So that would be, those would be my recommendations. Did that answer your question?
Thank you for the presentation. Maurice Clark from the Cleveland chapter. Just wanted to ask, you mentioned the reviews. Do you know if there are templates that are out there? And I don't know if you already addressed that or I just missed it or whatever. But,
Templates for reviews?
yes, for reviews.
There's going to be one in this link.
Oh, there will be one.
Yeah. That second link, if you click on the link, it'll have instructions and it will have a template where it's check this box. I've done this box, I've done that, I've not done that, I don't have that, this is not a part of my organization, but it's all in that.
If you mention that.
No.
Thank you.
If you have a question, somebody else can. Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but to go off of what you said earlier about collaborating, how many CPAs do we got in here? None? Does anybody know how many CPAs they have in their chapter, or if they have CPAs in their chapter?
Yep.
Okay, so if we send out a Google form to collect CPAs, would that help? And then we could Okay, we go from there. Okay, and then the other thing is, does everybody know about TechSoup? And the free resources, does everybody use QuickBooks? If not, TechSoup, free resources, discounted prices for nonprofits. QuickBooks helps. There's training too. So just giving out some suggestions. Yes.
So you have QuickBook Pro advisors that are amongst our group. So if you need questions or anything design, tap us and let us know. Creating your chart of accounts is very important when you get ready to your tax return, if you have them. So we're here, and we're here to help. And use this as much as you can. Oh, I'm with the Phoenix chapter. Yeah, Phoenix, I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm very heavily connected with Intuit. I do the whole gamut because it's important.
Yes.
It's a full circle. The accountant, the bookkeeping, the tax return, and Intuit gives you everything because they're a technology company. And you're gonna jump on the bandwagon, it's just AI stuff, and you're gonna figure it out.
Any more questions? That's awesome. Like, you have the resources here. This is a professional organization. There are so many resources here. There are people who may not be CPAs. Like I said, I'm not a CPA, but I am an auditor. There are people that can support you and help you. The first thing is, don't be embarrassed to say, I don't know, right? Just, if you don't know, you don't know. The embarrassment should be in not knowing and saying not knowing. Right? You have the information available to you, ask for help.
We gotta log into this.
To add to that comment, so we talked about QuickBooks, but for, right?
Thank you. So Camille Dixon, Central Florida chapter. So for those of you that have smaller chapters like Central Florida, QuickBooks is a wonderful tool, but we also have the Wave, which is a free tool that allows you to do similar events that QuickBooks does. So if anyone has questions about that, please reach out. Thank you for the presentation, CFE as well. I loved it, loved every minute of it. So thank you.
Right, I'm running out of time. I think we have one more question. Do we have another question?
We can stream.
Oh, all right. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, everyone. Is everybody still awake?
Yes.
No.
No, that was amazing.
They just ate. All right, everyone. So we're going to transition to another topic. You are